Carlos Alcaraz's biggest problem after the US Open. Carlos Alcaraz faces his toughest challenge yet and has spoken about his biggest goal after winning the US Open and becoming number one. After conquering the US Open and regaining the world number one spot, the Mercian now faces a challenge that could define the course of his career, staying at the top during the part of the season where he has historically struggled the most. The triumph at the US Open was not just another one. For Alcaraz, it meant returning to the very top of the world rankings 2 years later, consolidating himself as the great reference point of the circuit, and placing himself in a position that, at just 22 years old, seemed reserved only for legends. 2 Wimbledons, 2 Roland Garros, and 2 US Opens. But one key piece is still missing from his trophy cabinet: Melbourne. The man from El Palmar made it clear in an interview, "It's the clear objective. I have Australia in my sights." With those words, he revealed what his priority will be in the coming months. For Carlitos, completing the Grand Slam, winning all 4 majors, is the goal guiding his preparation and his schedule. I would love to complete the Grand Slam. It's the main objective every year. It's why we train and why we do a very good preseason, to arrive as best as possible to Australia. And it's no coincidence. The Australian Open is the only major he is missing. Djokovic has made it his home, Nadal had some of his most epic feats there, but for Alcaraz it is still unfinished business. In 2025 he will try again, with one extra detail: in Melbourne his great rival Jannik Sinner will be defending his title. And the possibility of another clash between the two is very present. The rivalry with the Italian is already the driving force of world tennis. They have played 5 finals this season, and 15 matches in total. The head-to-head favors Alcaraz, with 10 wins to 5, but he himself admitted, "Jannik has also won many matches. My good streak is happening now. Maybe there will be a time when he will have a good streak." Beyond the numbers, Alcaraz values what it means to share an era with Sinner: the matches we play, the moments in which we play, and the way in which we make each other better. It's quite a good rivalry. A statement that shows respect, but also the certainty that every step he takes in his career will be marked by those battles. The US Open was a party. Carlos Alcaraz returned to New York, to Arthur Ashe, and was crowned champion again, just as he did in 2022. A victory that returned him to world number one and confirmed what everyone already knew, that at 22 years old, he is destined to be the absolute reference in world tennis. But what few say is that the hardest part is yet to come. The end of the season has always been a huge obstacle for the Mercian. While at Roland Garros or Wimbledon he shines brightly, when the circuit moves to hard courts, indoors, and with endless travel, his performance drops. And this year, with the weight of being number one, the pressure is even greater. The first test is just around the corner, the Laver Cup, which kicks off this Friday in San Francisco. It's an exhibition tournament, yes, but with top-level rivals that will demand the most from him. Beyond the spectacle, it will serve as the first test to measure whether he arrives with the energy and adaptation needed for what's ahead. Because the serious part starts right after. The Asian Tour will define much of his immediate future. First in Tokyo, with an ATP 500 that will force him to keep the bar very high. Then, the Masters 1000 in Shanghai, a key and very demanding event. In between, a very peculiar tournament, the 6 King Slams in Saudi Arabia, with $6 million for the champion. An event with the feel of an exhibition, but one that demands competition at the highest level. And then comes the big one, Paris-Bercy. A Masters 1000 he has never managed to win, and that, historically, has cost him a lot. It will be the last hurdle before what he truly pursues, the ATP Finals. That is the big goal, the title he is still missing and which many consider the definitive step to consecrate himself. But Turin won't be easy. It's played indoors, on an ultra-fast court, conditions that have always been uncomfortable for him. Moreover, he will face Jannik Sinner, who will be motivated to play at home in front of his fans. The pressure will be maximum and the prize historic, to conquer the finals for the first time and end the year as number one. And as if that weren't enough, there's still the question of the Davis Cup in Bologna. Spain needs its leader, but the schedule, fatigue, and travel could complicate his decision. The physical and mental wear will be brutal, and every tournament he plays could determine how his season ends. A champion is not made only of victories, but also of conflicts. And that is precisely what Carlos Alcaraz has experienced with his coach Juan Carlos Ferrero. What many called a crisis ended up being the driving force of the Mercian's best version at the US Open. And pay attention, because a tennis legend like Patrick Mouratoglou has explained it without filters. Carlos Alcaraz and Juan Carlos Ferrero form one of the most successful duos in modern tennis. Since the former world number one took the reins of his career, the Mercian has only grown until winning 6 Grand Slams and regaining the top of the world rankings. But even in the strongest relationships, there are moments of tension, and they also had theirs. According to Muratoglu, coach of historic figures like Serena Williams, the Mercian and his coach did not always agree on how to approach his career. Ferrero, obsessed with discipline and absolute professionalism, and Carlos, just 22, demanding space to enjoy life and not lose the freshness that characterizes him on and off the court. That clash of visions, which some labeled a crisis, was in fact a turning point. Because, as the Frenchman explained on his Instagram, both knew how to compromise. Juan Carlos understood that Alcaraz is young and needs free time to enjoy life. Carlos knows he must take his training and matches very seriously, be professional. They reached an agreement. The result of that balance didn't take long. After the tough defeat against David Goffin in Miami, a blow that seemed to throw him off course, Alcaraz came back stronger than ever. And in New York, he delivered an impeccable US Open, where he not only lifted his 6th major but also convinced critics and legends alike. Muratoglu made it clear after following each of the Mercian's matches in the tournament, "Honestly, I had never seen Carlos so focused in every match of a Grand Slam." Words that carry weight, coming from someone who has coached players who defined eras. What seemed like a crisis became the perfect fuel. Ferrero and Alcaraz found the balance between discipline and freedom, between professionalism and youth. And from that agreement was born the deadliest version of Carlitos, the one that led him to conquer the US Open and return to being world number one. Perhaps that is the key to his reign, a team that knows how to argue, clash, and reconcile. Always with a common goal, to make history. Alcaraz's reaction after the incredible comeback in the Davis Cup. The Spanish tennis team achieved a historic feat this Sunday against Denmark. The team captained by David Ferrer came back from 0-2 down, something it had never done before, to secure a ticket to the Final 8 in Bologna, to be held from November 18 to 23. Carlos Alcaraz, one of the absentees from this tie, spoke out on social media after his teammates' great effort. "Let's go ooh. Huge. Host of the world number one." And indeed, the victory of Spain's B unit, with Jaume Munar as the highest-ranked player, allows Spain to fight for another Davis Cup. Moreover, there is the possibility that, this time, they can count on Carlos Alcaraz if injuries don't get in the way. These finals will be the last tournament of the season for the elite players who participate, as they will take place right after the Masters tournament, which is always the year's final cherry on top. That means Alcaraz will not have to save himself for other tournaments, as was the case here, and can make the effort to extend his season a little more to represent Spain. Charlie, despite having multiple titles such as 6 Grand Slams, has not yet won a Davis Cup. In Italy, he will once again have the chance to achieve it alongside his teammates. This year it will be played in Bologna, a location that makes it easier for players competing in the ATP finals to attend, since that tournament is played in Turin. The trip would be within the same country. Carreño's reflection on Carlos Alcaraz's absence in the Davis Cup. The man from Gijón has praised the level of Spanish tennis after seeing David Ferrer's call-up despite the absences of Carlos Alcaraz, Alejandro Davidovich, and Marcel Granollers. With an eye on the 2025 Bologna Davis Cup Finals, Spain plays for qualification tomorrow at the Puente Romano Tennis Club in Marbella against Denmark. Pablo Carreño, returning to the national team call-up, will face Denmark's number 1, Holger Rune. That match should have been for Carlos Alcaraz, but the Mercian withdrew for rest from the qualifying round after lifting the US Open. However, the man from Gijón believes Spain has the depth to cover for the absence of the world number 1. "I think we're privileged. Spain is a country that has many very high-level players. In any other team, you take away the number 1, the number 2, and their number 1 doubles player. And they practically can't even show up to compete," he explained to Punto de Break. "We, in the end, are coming with players like Jaume, who is ranked 40 in the world and just made the 4th round at the US Open, Pedro, who has also been there, Carbiez, who has won ATP titles. I think we have a lot of depth," he added. Carreño is aware that with Carlitos everything would be easier, but he trusts that the Armada will get through and qualify for the finals. "Of course we are not all Carlos Alcaraz, but I think we can compete and win the tie, which will be tough, of course, but we are more than capable," he concluded.